The beeswax candles flicker violently against the mirrored walls of a sumptuously appointed hall in the Place Vendôme. Paris, the year is 1780. The air is thick with a heavy, cloying scent of incense and the ethereal, almost unbearable hum of a glass harmonica, an instrument of spinning crystal bowls that emits frequencies designed to pierce the very soul. In the center of the room, 30 people from vastly different social strata are joined by silk cords, forming a human circuit around a massive oak tub known as the baquet. Inside this tub lies a secret alchemical mixture of water, ground glass, and iron filings, arranged in precise, layered geometric patterns. Curved iron rods emerge from the box like the ribs of a prehistoric beast, pressed against the aching parts of the sufferers, a gasping chest, a swollen knee, a throbbing temple. There is a silence charged with static electricity, a collective breath held in anticipation. Suddenly, a man emerges from the shadows with a presence that seems to warp the very gravity of the room. He wears a robe of lilac silk, embroidered with golden astronomical symbols that shimmer under the dim amber light. He carries no surgeon's knives, prescribes no debilitating bloodletting, and touches no vials of toxic mercury. He simply points his fingers or a small iron wand toward the patients. Within seconds, the phenomenon begins. A woman collapses into a violent convulsion, screaming in a deep, guttural trance, followed by a nobleman who begins to weep uncontrollably for traumas he didn't even know he carried. Moments later, the paralysis vanishes, the chronic pain evaporates, and the impossible unfolds before an astonished crowd. This man is no mage, though the authorities call him a charlatan, to avert the public's gaze from his true discovery. He is a physician who believes he has found the key to the human unconscious decades before the birth of psychoanalysis and the invisible fabric that holds the whole of the universe together. His name is Franz Antoine Mesmer, and he has just uncovered something so threatening to the structure of established power that his life is about to become a battlefield. But in doing so, he made the fatal mistake of challenging the only force more powerful than disease: the ego of the scientific elite and the terror the ruling class has for any force it cannot bottle, tax or control. This is the story of how one of the greatest discoveries regarding the mind-body connection was buried under the weight of a royal conspiracy led by names you were taught to admire in every history book. At the Unseen Key, our mission is to unearth these silenced truths, returning a voice to those erased by the tides of time. If you believe that knowledge is our last line of defense against a manufactured forgetting, join us now. Subscribe and turn on your notifications. By doing so, you are not just following a channel. You are becoming a guardian of memory against the architects of silence. Because what they call imagination, we call the beginning of a revolution that was aborted before it could change the world forever. A revolution that began with a strange magnetism flowing from the hands of a man who knew far too much. To understand how this German physician arrived at such a reality-shattering discovery, we must dive into the dark basements of 18th century science. A period where the border between physics and magic was still a thick, swirling mist. Franz Anton Mesmer did not emerge from the fringe. He was a brilliant academic, a product of the University of Vienna. where he mastered philosophy, theology, and law before dedicating his entire existence to the study of medicine. However, his mind was never satisfied with the crude medical manuals of the era, which treated the human body as a mere collection of clockwork parts. While his peers were memorizing the brutal techniques of battlefield amputation, Mesmer was obsessively reading Isaac Newton and the ancient dusty tomes of the alchemists. His grand epiphany came from a radical, almost heretical interpretation of the law of universal gravitation. He asked a question that terrified the Church and the Academy. If the immense mass of the planets can move entire oceans across a cold vacuum through the tides, why would the human body, composed almost entirely of fluids, be immune to this celestial influence? He proposed the existence of a gravitas animalis, or animal gravity, a physical, universal, and invisible fluid that permeates everything in existence. He imagined the universe not as a void, but as an infinite, vibrant ocean of energy, where every living being is a single vibrating note in a cosmic symphony. In his 1766 thesis, he described this fluid as being so subtle that it leaves no trace for the clumsy instruments of man, yet so powerful that it is the primary driver of life, thought, and health. He spent years in his laboratory trying to isolate this substance, believing initially that the secret lay in mineral magnets. He spent thousands of hours testing how different magnetic fields affected the blood flow and nervous systems of animals and volunteers alike. He read the forbidden texts of Paracelsus, who claimed that the magnet is the king of all secrets, and he began applying magnetic plates to the bodies of patients suffering from supposedly incurable nervous disorders. The results were shocking. Patients who had suffered from debilitating hysteria and intractable pain reported a sensation of an electric current racing through their limbs, followed by immediate, inexplicable relief. He believed he had found the physical language of life itself. But what he did not realize in those early, optimistic years was that the magnets were merely the scaffolding for a much deeper discovery. The true power did not reside in the cold black metal, but in the very fabric of human consciousness, a realization he was about to confirm through a case that would forever alter the trajectory of his life and the history of medicine. The moment of Mesmer's definitive rupture with traditional medicine occurred in 1774 during the treatment of a patient named Franziska Österlin. She was suffering from a severe, agonizing form of hysteria that caused daily convulsions, incessant vomiting, and temporary bouts of paralysis that no physician in Vienna could explain, let alone treat. Mesmer began the treatment by applying magnets to her chest and legs, but something extraordinary happened that defied all his previous data. He noticed that the patient reacted violently to the movement of his hands, even when he was not holding the magnets. If he simply gestured toward her, she felt the same tidal wave of energy as before. It was here that he had his true eureka moment. The fluid did not reside in the magnets. The fluid was inherent to the human being. The magnets were mere conductors, but the physician himself was the generator. He rechristened his discovery animal magnetism. He came to believe that disease was nothing more than a blockage in this universal flow, a kind of energetic dam causing stagnation within the human vessel. If a doctor could act as a conduit, Clearing these channels through magnetic passes, health would be restored naturally without the need for toxic drugs or the barber's blade. He began to document every single case with a near-obsessive rigor, noting thermal reactions, subtle shifts in pulse, and the onset of deep trance states. He wasn't chasing the occult. He was attempting to found a new physics of medicine. He stated that the human body possesses poles, just like the Earth, and that health depends on the perfect balance between these poles. However, in a Vienna dominated by Catholic conservatism and a medical elite that profited immensely from invasive, expensive treatments, the idea that a man could heal through the simple presence of his hands was a direct threat to the guild. They began to whisper the word sorcerer, but the success of his cures was so undeniable that the lines outside his clinic grew longer every day. The physician was at the height of his confidence, believing that science would soon surrender to the facts of his results. It was in this climate of extreme tension and rising hope that the case emerged which would define his legacy. The meeting with Maria Theresa von Paradis, the young girl whose fate would seal the fall of a pioneer and reveal the true darkness of the Viennese medical establishment. Maria Theresa von Paradis was the diamond of Vienna, a young piano prodigy, blind since the age of 3. Her music was so divine that Empress Maria Theresa of Austria herself became her patron, granting her a lifelong pension. Maria Theresa's blindness was a medical enigma. Her eyes appeared physically healthy and bright, yet she saw absolutely nothing. For over a decade, she was tortured by the official science of the day. They applied hundreds of leeches to her eyelids until she was pale from blood loss. They subjected her skull to electric shocks so intense she frequently lost consciousness. They injected harsh chemicals directly into her eyes. Nothing worked. In 1977, in a final act of desperation, her parents brought her to the man they whispered had control over the fluid of life. Mesmer began the treatment in an atmosphere of profound, focused calm. Instead of shocks and blades, he used gentleness. He spent hours making slow, deliberate movements over the girl's face and eyes, attempting to unblock the optic nerve through suggestion and energy. After weeks of intense treatment, the miracle finally manifested. Maria Theresa began to perceive light, then color. Eventually, she could make out the outlines of people. There is a heart-wrenching account of the moment she saw the physician's face for the first time and was terrified by the sight of a human nose, which she had imagined was something entirely different. She began to describe the world with an almost heartbreaking, childlike joy, but what should have been the triumph of the century became a political nightmare. Rival doctors, led by the influential Dr. Sturck, fell into a panic. If a girl, blind for 10 years, was cured by a charlatan, the credibility of the entire Vienna Faculty of Medicine would be pulverized instantly. Furthermore, the girl's family realized that if she could see, the Empress might revoke her disability pension. To them, the profit and the prestige of a blind prodigy were worth more than the girl's sight. A violent psychological pressure was exerted upon the young woman. They told her the doctor was enchanting her, that her sight was a devilish illusion. The conflict reached a fever pitch when Maria Theresa's father stormed the clinic with a sword, attempting to drag his daughter away. In the midst of this chaotic emotional stress, Maria Theresa's psychosomatic blindness returned. She plunged back into the darkness, Mesmer was hounded out of Vienna under accusations of fraud and moral misconduct. But he was not defeated. He left for Paris with a conviction stronger than ever. The power of the mind over the flesh was a reality, and he would prove it on the world's most important stage, regardless of the cost. His arrival in Paris in 1778 was like the impact of a meteor on a crumbling civilization. France was on the jagged edge of a revolution, saturated with Enlightenment ideals and hungry for anything that challenged the stagnancy of the old regime. The German physician did not hide. He set up a sprawling operation in the luxurious Place Vendôme and began treating the most influential figures of the royal court. But what made his work truly dangerous to the king and the church was the social nature of his sessions. In his famous collective treatments around the baquet, he ignored every rule of French class etiquette. High-ranking nobles sat shoulder to shoulder with common artisans. Ladies of the court held the hands of poor laborers. All were joined by the magnetic current. Animal magnetism was acting as a democratic catalyst, proving that at the biological and energetic level, there was no difference between blue blood and the blood of the people. This energetic equality was a political heresy of the highest order. He founded the Society of Universal Harmony, an organization that spread like wildfire, raising astronomical sums of money and training thousands of devoted followers. He was creating an army of people who believed that the authority over their own bodies did not belong to the state or the royal physicians, but to a universal fluid that every human possessed by birthright. Queen Marie Antoinette herself became a secret admirer, and the Marquis de Lafayette, fresh from fighting in the American Revolution, became one of his greatest advocates. Lafayette saw in magnetism an extension of the ideals of liberty. If a man is connected to the universe by a physical force, he is sovereign. This was what monarchs feared most, a mass of people conscious of their own inner power. The scientific elite, led by the Academy of Sciences, realized they were not fighting a mere doctor, but a social movement that could dismantle the very foundations of authority. The stage was set for the final, brutal confrontation between mechanical reason and vibrational intuition, a battle that would determine the course of Western medicine for the next 200 years. To understand what happened next, we must dissect exactly what occurred inside those Parisian sessions. The baquet was not just a tub of water. It was a symbolic, psychological machine. Mesmer understood the power of staging and mass psychology. He used the haunting music of the glass harmonica to induce alpha states in his patients. He utilized mirrors to reflect the magnetic light, creating a sensory-rich environment that bypassed the analytical mind. He formulated 27 technical propositions explaining how the fluid operated. He said it was capable of receiving, propagating, and communicating all impressions of movement. He claimed the physician was like a piano tuner, adjusting the vibrating strings of the patient's life force. In these sessions, the famous crises occurred, moments where the patient released physical and emotional traumas through tremors, weeping, or deep trances. Today, modern psychology recognizes this as abreaction, a vital process of emotional release. But at the time, it was viewed as something supernatural, scandalous, or even demonic. The doctor insisted that the crisis was the path to the cure, the moment the energetic dam finally broke. His success was so overwhelming that he began to magnetize entire trees in public squares so the poor could heal themselves for free simply by leaning against them. He was democratizing healthcare in a way the official medical guilds would never allow. He argued that animal magnetism was a natural property like breathing and should not be patented or controlled by a medical monopoly. This aggressive altruism was the final nail in his coffin. In 1784, King Louis XVI, pressured by advisors who saw in magnetism the seeds of a republican disorder, ordered the creation of a royal commission of inquiry to give the final verdict on the invisible fluid. The fate of magnetism was now in the hands of the most powerful men of rationalist science, and they were not looking for the truth. They were looking for a way to kill an idea. The Royal Commission of 1784 is perhaps the most documented case in history of how academic prejudice can be used as a weapon to blind the public to a genuine discovery. The group of investigators was a who's who of the European intelligentsia. Benjamin Franklin, the American polymath and ambassador to Paris, brought his pragmatic skepticism. Antoine Lavoisier, the man who weighed the air and defined modern chemistry, brought his cold mathematical rigor. Joseph Ignace Guillotin, the reformist physician, brought his political lens. These men did not go to the Baquet sessions to observe the cures, of which there were thousands of documented cases. They went to prove that the fluid did not exist as a physical, measurable substance. They conducted experiments that we today call double-blind, but they did so with a distorted intent. They blindfolded patients and told them the magnetizer was in the room when he was actually in another. If the patient felt nothing when the doctor was absent, they claimed the fluid was a fake. If the patient felt something when the doctor wasn't there, they claimed it was merely imagination. The verdict delivered by Lavoisier and Franklin was a masterstroke of rhetorical manipulation. They did not deny that people were getting better, but they attributed the results exclusively to imagination. In doing so, they created a stigma that would poison the well of mind-body science for centuries. They decided that imagination was an error of the mind, a defect to be ignored rather than a powerful tool of healing. They effectively severed the soul from the body in Western science. But the secret report handed to the king contained something far more insidious, a warning about morality. They suggested that the magnetizer's touch on female patients could lead to sexual excess and that the physical proximity in the salons was a threat to the social order. They couldn't debunk the cures, so they destroyed the character of the healer. The report was published and distributed throughout France, labeling animal magnetism as a dangerous illusion. Mesmer was publicly ridiculed, transformed into a caricature in every newspaper. The Parisian elite, always the first to adopt a trend and the first to betray it, turned their backs on him instantly, leaving him to face the coming storm alone. The fall of Mesmer coincided perfectly with the fall of the French monarchy itself. It is one of the grandest ironies of history. While the physician was being destroyed by Lavoisier and Bailly, the French Revolution was being whispered into existence in the very same salons where magnetism was practiced. Many of the key revolutionaries were avid magnetizers. They saw in the breaking of fluidic currents a perfect symbol for breaking the chains of tyranny. However, when the reign of terror began, the very judges who had condemned the magnetizer were not spared by the machine they helped build. Antoine Lavoisier, the man who used logic to erase the fluid of life, ended his days under the blade of Guillotin's machine. Bailey, the author of the devastating report, met the same fate. The system they tried to protect with their rigid rationalism ended up devouring them whole. The German physician, however, survived. He had the foresight to retreat from Paris before the blood began to flow through the gutters. He watched from afar as the society that had both exalted and humiliated him collapsed into total chaos. He spent his final years in the small Swiss town of Meersburg, living in a state of quiet simplicity. He never stopped treating the poor and the forgotten. Accounts from the time describe a serene old man who spent his afternoons playing his glass harmonica for the birds and the local peasants. He watched his discovery be fragmented and stolen. He saw his pupils, like the Marquis de Puységur, discover artificial somnambulism, which was nothing more than the hypnotic trance without the violent convulsions. Magnetism was changing, becoming more focused on the mental and less on the physical fluid, but the essence remained the same. He wrote in his memoirs that the truth may be obscured by the passions of men, but it is like the light of the sun, impossible to extinguish forever. He died in 1815, the same year Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, marking the definitive end of an era. He was buried in a simple grave, but the force he had described was just beginning its long underground journey through the hidden corridors of history. What happened after the German doctor's death is what makes this story truly disturbing for modern science. Animal magnetism did not die. It was merely rechristened over and over again, so that the Academy could accept the results without ever admitting the pioneer was right. The Scottish surgeon James Braid, years later, coined the term hypnotism, specifically to distance the technique from the mystical ideas of an invisible fluid. He wanted the respect of his peers, so he gave the practice a Greek, scientific-sounding name. At the end of the 19th century, a young Sigmund Freud traveled to France to study with Charcot and Bernheim, both of whom used methods derived directly from animal magnetism. Freud began his career as a hypnotist. He realized there was a part of the mind, the unconscious, that stored trauma and could be accessed through altered states of consciousness. The entire structure of modern psychoanalysis was built upon the ruins of Mesmer's clinic. But Freud, in his own desperate search for scientific acceptance, eventually distanced himself from the bioenergetic roots of magnetism, focusing solely on language and narrative. Today, neuroscience is finally beginning to validate what the man in the lilac robe was shouting about. We now know that the heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the human body. We know that intention and suggestion can radically alter brain chemistry through the placebo effect. We know that human touch has measurable healing properties. When we talk about biofeedback or frequency therapy, we are merely whispering Mesmer's name in a modern laboratory. He was the true pioneer of psychosomatic medicine, the first man to scream that the mind and the body are a single, indissociable entity. He was silenced because his discovery was too vast for the 18th century to contain, and because he dared to suggest that the power of healing did not belong to the men with diplomas, but to the very life force that pulses within every one of us. As we reach the end of this long, dark trajectory, we look back at the figure of Franz Anton Mesmer, not as a charlatan, but as a martyr of the transition between the ancient world and the modern. He was the man who attempted to unite the cold physics of Newton with the heat of the human soul, and he paid the price for being centuries ahead of his time. The story of animal magnetism serves as a haunting warning about the danger of scientific consensus when it is used as a weapon of political and social control. The verdict of 1784 is still used today to dismiss any revolutionary discovery that threatens the massive financial interests of the global health industry. But the circle finally closes when we realize that the imagination Lavoisier so deeply despised is, in fact, the greatest tool for the creation of reality that we possess. The magnetizer's legacy lives on in every person who seeks to understand the invisible laws that govern our health and our freedom. We at the Unseen Key believe that unearthing these stories is a profound act of resistance. This key we have handed to you today is not just about a forgotten past. It is about your immediate present. It is about the power you carry in your own hands and within your own mind. Never let anyone tell you that your inner strength is just imagination. Your imagination is the final frontier of your own sovereignty. If this story resonated with you, if it awakened something the system has tried to lull into a deep sleep, share it. Comment below. What other discovery do you believe is being called a fraud today simply because it threatens someone's profit margins? Your participation is what keeps this channel independent and alive. Franz Antoine Mesmer died in ostracism, but his voice has never been more necessary than it is today. Truth does not need permission to exist. It only needs people brave enough to remember it. Magnetism was never about magnets. It was always about the invisible connection between all of us. And that connection is something no king, no commission, and no shadow can ever hope to sever.